the Indian literature. And similarly, the literary history in India and scholars are also focused and still focus on the single literature. And this single focus perspective is a result of both colonial and past colonial perspective. And letter found in the motto of Sahitya Academy that Indian literature is one, though written in many languages. So, however, this perspective was opposed by scholars who argue that the country where so many languages coexisted should be understood as a country with the literatures and the plural, not singular, right? And instead of Indian literature singular, we should speak of Indian literatures as a plural. So the resistance has emerged to the unity thesis is called hegemonic apprehensions. So, that's why we got this hegemonic apprehension concept. And because we look at the only single perspective, and their response to academy's motto with Indian literature, um, because it is written in many languages. And he also rejects the idea of Goethe's world literature. And he stands for celebration of differences. And I think that's a very good thing. And for him, comparative literature is thus an exercise in differential multilingual. Okay, I think sorry. Yeah, I missed one thing. Okay, sorry. So they've also talked about the Guru Bhagat Singh proposal of differential multilingual. So Dev takes into account of Guru Bhagat Singh's notion of the differential multilingual, and while the Singh does not accept that the idea of Indian literature, but he came up with the differential multilingual that literature produced in uh, India. He not refer to that, and he rejects the notion of Indian literature because the notion such includes and promotes a national identity. He rejects that because that it promotes national identity, and not only linguistic but the cultural aspect of literature needs to be taken into consideration. He rejects both the French and American school of comparative literature, which deal with the influence and impact on, so he rejects both the school of comparative literatures. He rejects also the idea of the greatest world literature, and he stands for the celebration of differences. And for him, that comparative literature is thus an exercise in differential multilingual. So his proposal for differential multilingual as a program will perhaps enable us to understand that Indian diversity without sacrificing the individuality of the particulars, like not giving one literature the like not India as a hegemonious language. Uh, so there is again one big question arrives that what should the Indian theorist do? So it cannot be denied that the pursuit of Indian literature, some of us have shown negative discrimination toward the texts produced in less important and different literature. So we're not giving the other languages that language and literature that are produced in India. We call it a less important or different literatures. So that's a big uh, mistake that we're doing. The theorist must make sure that commonality will not turn into ideological and political commodity, uh, like everyone going for the English language and literature should not be turned into ideological and political commodity. We should not forget the regional literatures. So we have the another critic called Aziz Ahmed, and his work on theory on the classes, nations, and literatures. So the Ahmed described the construct of syndicated Indian literatures. So what and that suggests that aggregative and unsatisfactory categorization of Indian literature. And the notion of, and he also talked about that notion of Indian literature is different from the notion of European literatures, because that European literature is best at umbrella designation and worse at pedagogical imposition. So it's not best at teaching. And while the Indian literature is classified and categorizable. So both are very different. And they also disagree with the view. They disagree with the Ahmed views, and Ahmed's concern is the only hegemony of English. And also, he does not suggest the abolition in a way which could be close to Nagogi's argument. So, the implement English as a function, owing to the ever-growing corpus of translation from the uh, various Indian literature into English, thus the making of Indian literature available to all. So, in addition to the argument against the construction of national literature advanced by the Ahmed, so there are other problems with the notion with this notion. So, this very idea of one language in India has been made real by now by ideological and political mechanism. So, the official national language is Hindi, and if literary text from the other language could be translated into Hindi, possibly arrive at the national Indian literature. So that he rejects the national notion of it, nationality. So, however, in this case, we could arrive at the hegemonization situation. On the other hand, it is clear that the realm of the education, English is the still largest single program in our college and university. We can't ignore that fact. And the concept of interliterary condition is in condition of India, which is again they talk about it. So the Indian literature is not an entity but an interliterary condition with the widest possible sense of the concept, which is related to Goethe's original idea of the world literature, somehow related, and it's also used by Marx and Engels in Communist Manifesto. So the interliterary condition of India reaches back much further than its manuscript or print culture. For example, we can look at the Bhakti movement that um, happened in 18th and 18th century. So we have a both theme and social issue, and has also variety of textual manifestation of various Indian languages and literature. So it's all interliterary and also connect. So it is possible to think of series such as subsystem. We can come up with a subsystem in which the individual literature being interrelated with the one another over the ages. Um, so he also takes the example of the Swapna Majmundar and takes a systematic approach in his 1985 book, Comparative Literature, Indian Dimensions. So Majumdar suggested that Indian literature is neither one or many, but rather a systematic whole, where many subsystems interact with one another and continuous never-ending dialect. So, such a systematic view of Indian literature predicates that we take all Indian literatures together, age by age, and view of them comparative. I think that's what the Sisir Kumar Das did. Yeah.
Yes.
So now again, they takes in the account.
Yeah. Questions, doubts.
Sisir Kumar Das. So it's not finished yet.
Continue.
So the Das is taken with his planned 10-volume project, A History of Indian Literature, whose first volume, 1800 and 1910, Western Impact and Indian Response, appeared in 1991. So Das takes very different methodological pragmatic approach. That's now we are aware in the comparative literatures. And the work proposed by the Das is not only comparative chronology, but it will include the narrative based on it. So he also take the 22 recognized literatures and looking at through the ages and compared it, and he also looked at the pattern of commonality in between them, and uh, yeah, and Das method uh, and result to date show that Indian literature is neither unity or not differential. So he came up with that. Today, with focus on reception and theoretical premises offered by the notion of interliterary process. So they understand that Indian literature is ever in making or remaking. So it's not something that established. So apart from the reception studies, there are other aspects which support the understanding of Indian literatures in interliterary process. So we can understand the Indian literature through the interliterary process. There are cross-cultural, connected, and we are located in our own languages, whether with an active or passive bilinguality. So, passive in such sense that refers to understanding second language without being able to speak it. So we somehow active or passive bilingual, and where we have access to the one or other two languages. And through inter-Indian translation, we have also access to the text from um, four or more languages. And as a readers, consciously or subconsciously, we place the tags in additional and beside our original and first tags. So now the conclusion of the essay is that there is a problematics of unity and diversity, and which are we are not unique to India. We're not, something that happens to the first time, and we live in this diversity. And they've demonstrated that comparative literature has taught us not to take comparison literary, but it also taught us that theory formation in literary history is not universally universally tenable. So they also suggest that we should first look at ourselves and try to understand our whole situation as truly as possible. And then we can give us a full shape of our own comparative literatures and their formulate comparative literature of diversity in general. Yeah.
Yes. Questions, doubts, comments, suggestions, observations. Hiba, just be careful with capitalization in grammar, right? Because these are the places that nitpickers, like the examiners like me, would put a red mark and it would work against you. So to work on your language as well. Okay, but it was a very comprehensive presentation. Brilliant. Questions, queries?
Hello, Biba.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, so in the essay and as well as in your presentation, there were a few mentions of a kind of binary approach. So, can you explain what Amiya Dev means by binary approach and what kind of position he has in reference to this binary approach?
Yes. So yes, he talked about this binary approach, like the commonality and the oneness. So he also gave us the like what theorists should do about this binary approach. So, and he also, Das also suggested, sorry, Dave also suggested that um, Indian theorist is not and the theory is not exactly as the cultural commonality, and we cannot look at the this binary approach as the we cannot go for this commonality, or we cannot go for the unity of as a in Indian language that other critics talk about. Instead, we can look at the interliterariness, and I also gave the example of the Bhakti movement, where the texts are interrelated and interconnected. So, for example, like I have also another example. So, like for example, we can look at the 20th century Oriya novel. So, or maybe we can look at the Bang Bengali novel or Oriya novel. So there must be, commonality in the juxtaposition, and or it can be we can look at the Urdu novel or any Gujarati novel. So there is same time that juxtaposition happen. So we have already made up our mind about that, so-called Indian novel in the first phase, and reduce this text to the common denominator. So what I am trying to say is that we cannot look at the, you know, uh, we can look at the, yes, of course, side by side this text, but that doesn't mean that um, there is something, yeah, I'm missing the word.
Does that Rushin clarify things for you or no?
So what?
I'm asking Rushi.
Sir, so actually my first question was because I couldn't clearly understand while I was reading what exactly uh, was he referring to when he says binary approach. So
Which
I
page
thought
number?
of, sir, from page number 2. He mentions it a few times, but it starts from page number 2. Uh, Binary approach.
Yeah. So this binary approach, right? So konsa binary approach will be found in the core text, right? This is one way we find out meanings or trying to understand a complex discourse, right? To learn how to read it carefully. I can tell you, but it won't help you to discover, right? So I'm teaching you how to fish rather than feeding you fish. So this binary approach means which binary approach would be mentioned earlier, right? So where will you find answer to this question?
Above the where the word is mentioned. I'll read it carefully, sir. One second.
Till then, Vibha, would you like to answer Nisha's question?
Yes, 1 minute.
Rushi, could you find out which binary approach?
Yes, I found that university and diversity and a literature for a singular literature for a diversity and distinctness.
So what does it mean?
So it means that there are two contradictory views. One view says that there should be a single literature which portrays unity in diversity, and the other approach which uh, pushes for every distinct literatures of India.
Correct. Right. So what does that mean? Say something more. You're right. You're absolutely right.
So I'm guessing that what Amiya proposes is that to look further than these two approaches.
Right. And what is that further approach to, instead of this binaristic approach?
Comparative literature.
Okay. But what is the specific terminology that he's talking about? And idea,
Inter
concept. Okay.
interliterariness.
Exactly. And what does that mean?
It means that there can be a single text uh, which can be of many literatures. I mean, not in a single language. There are it Indian literature does not belong to a single literature. Uh, it is interliterary.
So what does, you are absolutely right, but what is that?
Sir,
Let him try and then we will take your question.
As Vibha has put it very nicely, there are some novels and even example of bhakti movement that you can find many. I mean, you can find a single bhajan or single any piece of literature in many different languages.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that that portrays the interliterariness
Okay,
well.
that's example of interliterariness, right?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely, but I am asking you, what does it mean?
So it means that a single literature cannot exist on its own,
Okay.
particularly in India.
Okay.
It transcends the boundary.
Okay.
It is not a singular,
Ah,
and at the same time, it has its own distinctiveness.
right. But look at it very simply. Interliterariness. Look at the term itself. If you're not able to grasp the term, you should look at it closely, and try to break it open, uh, and try to understand what does prefix inter mean.
Inter means between between the two or
Right.
more.
Right. Like inter, where do you else use
National,
international?
international,
And
interdisciplinary.
correct. So what does international mean, or interstate? Interstate competition, you have heard of the term? Interstate competition.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So what does that mean?
It means the competition between different states.
Hmm. between different states, right? Between two or more states. That is
Yes.
बराबर है ना?
हाँ
So
sir.
interliterary then.
Between comparison between two literatures.
Is it comparison alone?
Not really comparison, but it has to be something. No?
Yeah. So what is that? क्या हो सकता है? Interliterary, like
Study.
interstate is between two or more states, right? Interstate.
Yes. Yes sir.
What is interliterary?
Between the two literature.
Two or more.
More. Yes. Yes sir. Yes.
So what would that be?
Something which is common to.
Okay. Right.
Common to both the literature,
Correct.
like both the language,
Right. Something that
kind
is
of
common
common
to the languages or
also there.
literatures. Correct. And what else? Right. That's why I'm pushing you further. Right. I'm not pushing you further because you are wrong. I'm pushing you further because you are getting it.
And the differences.
Relation between them. Okay. What do you mean by relation between them?
Yes. Yes sir.
What does that mean? What is relation between them?
Relation means that they are communicating with each other,
Okay.
or they.
Very good. Right. What kind
Yes.
of communication? You're right. Absolutely.
They are taking something from each other and in return giving something of their own
Very
to
good.
the other.
There is an exchange and a dialogue, and there is commonality between the two, right? There is an activity, like say for example, interstate bus would be bus that goes between two states. Interstate competition would be competition between two or more states, right? So there is something going on between two. It's an activity, and that activity is that of, as you say, what kind of activity?
Give and take.
Give and take.
Exchange. Yes.
Exactly. So instead of thinking about Indian literature only as a unified whole or an essence or something that is homogeneous, or thinking of Indian literature as only diversity, right? Without any connection between them, where each literature is distinctive from another. Gujarati is different from Bengali and is different from Punjabi, and Malayalam is different from Tamil. So instead of thinking about that as a diversity or unity, you think of it as interliterary, right? Does that make any sense? Instead of a binaristic approach, he is recommending
Yes, sir. Yes.
interliterary approach. Instead of two approaches, which Rushi pointed out, unity-based approaches or diversity-based approaches, he is proposing interliterary approach, which can be between two or it can be between three or four, any. Yani there is always something going around between these multiple literatures. So there is always something that is going around between Tamil and Malayalam literature. There is an exchange. There is similarity. Then there is obviously diversity, but there is also a dialogue, right? And that's the term that they talk to each other. There is a communication, as Rushi says, right? So that is what we mean by interliterariness, and that term was extensively theorized by a person called Dionys Durizin, whom we will study in your paper on comparative literature, right? उसके बाद पूरा चैप्टर आएगा. Unit 2, Essay 1 is on interliterary processes. Okay. Yeah. So let's go to Nisha's question. Is that clear to you now, Rushi?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Amir's argument that we cannot think of Indian literature as a unified whole, as if all literatures, whether it's Punjabi or Gujarati and Marathi and Tamil and Indian writing in English, are one and the same. ऐसे तो नहीं consider कर सकते. At the same time, you cannot just say कि गुजराती लिटरेचर और बंगाली लिटरेचर पूरी तरह से अलग है. Diversity approach, right? You cannot say that because there is always something going on between Bengali and
Similar in between both the.
yeah, there is some in between things that are happening. So I don't know how many people are familiar with Bengali literature and Gujarati literature. कोई है ऐसा कुछ? दोनों से familiar हो ऐसा? I don't know. For example, there is something like Bhakti poetry, there is something like Ghazal, there is something like colonial history, right? That is shared. So there are shared things as well between literatures as diverse as Bengali and Gujarati, or Malayalam and Gujarati, right? There are things which are shared, but this sharedness is not complete commonality, as the question about sensus communis that he talks about. Sensus communis means common sense, means common sensory data, experiential life. So experiential life of a person in Punjab and experienced life, lived life of a person in Malayalam, वो एक ही है ऐसा मानने की जरूरत नहीं है, right? That is what he means by that. Sensuous communis. Nisha. Right? So commonality is of dialogic kind rather than of commonality. There is Ghazal tradition in Gujarati and there is a Ghazal tradition in Hindi. And there is a tradition of Ghazal in Marathi. Now that doesn't mean they are same. There is no sensuous, but they are interliterary in the sense that they have taken from Ghazal as a genre and made it their own. So it has its own individual history in Marathi, in Gujarati, and in Hindi. All three of them have taken from Urdu and Hindustani, which has taken from Persian and Arabic. So you can see that one thing is giving something to another and something is giving it to another, and it gets, and that is what is meant by interliterary dialogue. So Ghazal is an interliterary process between multiple languages and literatures, not just Urdu and Arabic. That's the example. Or Bhakti is another example, right? So is that clear what is interliterary?
Yes, sir.
And that connects to Nisha's question as well, right? That binary approach is looking at either unity or diversity. And he says we cannot look at it only from unity perspective. You cannot look at it only from diversity perspective. You have to take an interliterary approach to understand Indian literature. Okay. And then the question that Nisha has asked is about situs. Can Vibha explain it?
Yes, sir. But I also want to add to the what Rishi said. Like they also talk about the subsystem in which that individual literature of India have been interrelated with one another over the ages, and that's why I give the Bhakti movements example of Bhakti movement.
It's historically so, right? Interliterariness is a byproduct of historical relations, right? Yes. And the question of relation is what is also asked by Diotima. So Diotima, what is relation then? here? The commonality, right? Which is not sameness, right? Which is not sameness. Differences, right? And exchange also, right? Dialogue, exchange, communication is also relationship, right? So because of dialogue between Urdu, Hindi and Hindi, Gujarati has developed what should I say? Ghazal tradition, right? Ghazal as a tradition in Gujarati is, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with Gujarati ghazals. No one? Or ghazals in your own language? Preeti, you're familiar with some ghazals? Rushi.
Yes, sir.
Adil Mansoori mainly.
Right. So you have read some of his ghazals, Preeti?
Yes, I mean not recently, and I don't remember a lot, but
I'm not
when yeah, I remember reading some by Adil Mansoori. Yeah.
Right, right. So it's a very popular tradition in Gujarati, as popular as it is in Urdu probably, right? Which is no less. Okay, so Gujarati ghazal kahan se aayi? Interlit. So you cannot think that Gujarati and Urdu and Hindi and Marathi are totally diverse as well. उनको एक दूसरे के साथ कुछ लेना देना ही नहीं है, ऐसा भी नहीं है. वो सब सेम है. That is also not true. So binaristic approach to the study of Indian literature is very reductive, and that's why he emphasizes the interliterary approach. Wait. Okay. Yes, Vibha, can you respond to the citus question?
Yes. So, if citus means that cultural and linguistic rootedness, and there is also notion of commonality, right? So we cannot ignore the danger of commonality into turning into a self-referentially, and even though as a nationalism or racism. So that's what Jaydev talk about citus, and he also talk about the theory or something about that. Sorry, site location, yes, or location of theory. So
What does
he said that citus is important because of importance as a theorization, and
so what is citus?
citus location,
Okay, of what?
location of theory.
What does that mean? Location of theory का मतलब क्या है?
I'm not very sure about it.
If somebody wants to add, what do you mean by citus of theories?
Sir, I am not sure as well, but I think from the place we observe thing and then theorize about it. That
Right,
place is the citus.
right. And why is that important?
Sometimes when we observe things, I mean, sometimes we say that uh, you need to experience things yourself, then you will be able to write more about it, and it it holds true for theorizing as well.
Okay.
For example, I am writing about Indian comparative literature, so I might have first-hand experience of in Indian literature. Then I would be able to write uh, more extensively than, let's say, a Canadian theorist.
Right. Correct. So you are absolutely right by what you mean by situs of theory. But why has he brought in this? What is the reason Amiya Dev is bringing this in? What's the objective behind that?
Because they wants to say that the wrong theory is bad, but the right theory from a wrong side is bad too. So
What
both,
does that mean? What does that mean? Yeah.
it means that both needed to be right, situs and theory.
Means why does he talk about these things? Situs. Why does situs become important for Amiya Dev?
Because for Indian context, theories only related to Indian literature are very scarce. So we need to develop them further, and we need to we need to develop our situs first as a
Okay.
place to observe.
Why?
Because theory, dominant theory, the dominant thread of theory belongs to the Western thought, and we need our own theories,
And why
and
is that?
we need.
You are absolutely right. Again, I'm just prodding you further. Why is that?
Because as Viba pointed out that the theory itself and the situs is both of them needs to be correct according to Amiya Dev.
But why? No, but why do you think he says that?
Because Western theory cannot be applied. Cannot be applicable to Indian literature.
My copy. Okay. Yeah. So why is that so? You are absolutely correct. 15, 20 minutes. I'm a copy for you. I will see it. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. What you are saying, Rishi. I'm just asking you further. Why is it that the theory coming from Western locations have a problem for Amiya Dev? What's wrong with them?
Because the purpose of them writing the theories were to understand their own literature better.
Very good. Very good. Very good. Absolutely. Right. Now you have got it. So what he is saying is that those theories are meant to make sense of their culture and cultural texts. Why, as our culture and cultural texts are different historically, right? We can't rely
Yes,
on
sir.
them blindly. That is what he's saying. We have to take into consideration our own situs location, which means that if you're going to talk about Gujarati literature, then you can just quoting Derrida is not going to help, because Derrida is working within a certain situs where he's offering a critique of metaphysics of presence, right, in the Western thought, the logocentrism of Western philosophy. right, is his critique. Now you have to see whether we had such kind of metaphysical formulations, and is it necessary for us to critique them, right? Before we say that, look, I'm going to borrow Derrida to understand Gujarati literary theory or literature. I hope you get that. Or whether I'm going to take new criticism, or whether I'm going to take Russian formalism and understand Tamil literature, right? You have to see whether it is relevant to the context, because contexts are so different historically. And that is his problem with post-structuralism, which talks of diversity, right, which is being evoked here. So post-structuralist theory has a very limited use in Indian context to think about tradition of Indian knowledge system, because Derrida is offering a very sharp critique of Western thought. But are the traditions of philosophy and thinking in India similar to that of West? So we have to check that, whether it is relevant to us. That is what he means by the importance of situs. Yes, Nisha says it's a cultural linguistic rootedness. Correct. Yes, because literature belongs to people. Exactly, Pooja. So that is what he shared. And I think Vibha also said the same thing, right, Vibha? That this is similar to what Shishir Kumar Das has said. You said that, right?
Yes.
So this is the situs, is the what Shishir Kumar Das says, terra firma, ground. याद आ रहा है? Which means that if I am going to use Jacques Lacan to understand Kabir, there is a problem, because Lacan is working within certain, there is certain set of questions that he is trying to address, right, and contribute to certain debates that are happening in psychoanalysis in the West. And are they relevant here when we are trying to make sense of what Kabir is saying, or trying to understand Kabir's philosophical project? That is what we mean by situs. Right. Anyone wants to say anything else? Any other question? Yes, Dehini, go ahead.
Yes, sir. So I had just confusion in one phrase on the first page of the essay. It was it's about the argument that she gives. I mean, that she doesn't give, but it's what it is debated so far. She said that it is sometimes claimed to be the only true Indian literature because of its freedom from regional ties. So, I mean,
She yani kaun? Vibha ya Amiya Dev?
no, Amiya Dev.
Amiya Dev is
Vibha. Sorry, please. Sorry.
No,
So he says that I did not understand this phrase. That what speaks against this argument is that, for example, the literature of one of the smallest spoken languages of a non-Indian origin too is sometimes claimed to be the only true Indian literature because of its freedom from regional ties.
right. So he's speaking of which literature?
He's speaking about Indian literature only. Initially,
He's speaking of one specific kind of literature.
major literatures of India which have dominated, which are they consider as a dominant one. They shine brighter than others.
वो कौन सा है?
Hegemonic apprehension. Hegemonic.
So, when you raise a question, when you say I didn't understand what Amiya Devi is saying here, you have to look at the context and the co-text. आगे क्या कहा और पीछे क्या कहा, right? So when he is saying one small literature which is of non-Indian origin and sometimes claimed to be only truly Indian literature because of its freedom from regional ties. So which literature is he talking about?
English.
Exactly. So
This
where,
is similar to the point we made yesterday, right?
right, that we think exactly that we think that Indian writing in English is literature and Indian literature. Rushdie to Chetan Bhagat, right? You forget that there is Agye and Pannalal Patel and Bankim Chandra and Tagore and so many others, right? So this small literature, why is he calling it smallest? He's not saying it is minor, but small. Why is Indian writing in English?
It's small because, first of all, this language only belongs to certain group of people.
Right, and it is
And
not of
only,
Indian origin, right?
yeah, it's not a
But it has usurped Indian literature. यानी Indian literature क्या है? So you talk of Rushdie, right? You talk of whatever is available in English, right? So that kind of readership is also small. So that is why it is small, but it has become hegemonic. I hope you get that.
Yes,
And
sir.
it is free from uh, regionality. That's why it becomes representative. Right? And that is the problem that he has with English. So neither Sanskrit nor English or Indian literature in English translation as well can be considered as representative Indian literature. You get that? That's his argument. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Why? Why cannot Indian writing in English claim to be representative?
Because because of various reasons, but the major one is that it does not belong to us. I mean, the language does not belong to us, and people who read are also less in number, and also this would not be considered as because it is also not connected to region. I mean, regional. There are no regional ties, so
Okay.
the only interliterariness maybe is not that. Uh, what's the word? Appealing to us, to the audience.
Or
Then
what you can say, instead of saying that it does not, it's not Indian, something that I would differ from, he's saying Indian origin. He's not saying it is not Indian. He's saying it is not of Indian origin, which is a different thing, right? But his problem is not that it is of non-Indian origin. His problem is when it considers itself to be the sole representative of Indian literature, then he has a problem, right? Look at, now I'm going to share something with you. Let me share the screen. Okay, can you see this linguistic composition? This is an old data. Is it visible?
yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right? So how many percent of Indians speak Hindi? Is 41. Right? Then the biggest language is other. Right? Which may include English. and other Indian languages. This blue दिख रहा है ना आपको? ये light blue consists of English and all other Indian languages. Then biggest is 8.1, which is Bengali, right? So biggest Indian language after Hindi of Indian origin is Bengali. Then you have Telugu. Then you have Marathi. Then you have, this is what? Tamil. Then you have Urdu. And then you have Gujarati. Then you have Kannada. And then you have Malayalam. English इसमें आ जाता है. So you cannot consider Sanskrit or even Hindi or English as only representative literature of India. It has to be a multiple thing, right? Any questions about that? Any doubts? Anyone has to say something? कोई बोल क्यों नहीं रहा है? Why are people so silent?
Sir. So if we make a English language or Hindi language as a representative of Indian literature, then our individual literature, like mine is Gujarati, would be left alone, and there would be no resistance to the notion of unity.
Yeah, so multiplicity of languages can only represent India. No single language can represent India. Right? That's what he's saying. Now let's look at.
But sir, when I came to know about Bangla literature is so much, in linguistic composition, so I was shocked that people are so, known about the language of Bengali. Like,
it's the second
it was
language
shocking.
in India. दुनिया में भारत में
Yeah.
language है Bengali, and plus Bengalis are very fiercely attached to their language, or at least they used to be once upon a time.
Yes.
In their literatures, so they would not think it below them to study Bangla literature, even if they are studying English literature, right? So unlike other Indian languages, which
Yes, sir, it happens.
yeah, so that is a kind of aggressiveness that they had, which in my view is very positive. But that was the case. Right now, I think case is different. It's no longer the same. I think people are, let me share another slide with you. Okay, this is the statistical data of latest statistical data, right? 2011 census. Can you see this? Can you see this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So Hindi population, total number of population is 43.63 of 135 crore people. English, जिनकी फर्स्ट लैंग्वेज है वो है 0.02 और जिनकी सेकंड लैंग्वेज इंग्लिश है वैसे है 10.67. दोनों मिला के 11% भी नहीं होते, यानी 100 भारतीय लोग लेते हो तो उसमें से सिर्फ 11 अंग्रेजी बोल पाएंगे कुछ हद तक. दो लोगों एक 0.2% people will be having English as their first language. What do you have to say about this? Any questions? कुछ क्या समझ में आ रहा है आपको? ये scheduled language है. Scheduled languages are that which are recognized by the government, but there are also other many tribal languages which are huge, like Billy, Santali, Billy. Okay, look at a percentage of people who said Sanskrit is their first language. तो उसका 0.2 है, और जिनकी सेकंड लैंग्वेज संस्कृत है वैसे 0.19 है. But these two people become representative of Indian languages and literature. That is where the problem begins. So even if English is numerically one of the small languages, because only around 11% people speak it, only 0.02% people have it as a first language. What do you have to say about these figures? Are they surprising for you? Are they not surprising for you? What do you realize by this?
Actually, sir, it was not surprising to know that, but so far we used to think that only few people can speak in English. That's true, but we also used to. I mean, I personally, I remember I also used to consider this thing that only few people can speak in English as something which is, amazing or maybe aristocratic, a little bit elite. Yeah.
That
But
makes you
now,
feel good about yourself because very few numbers of people can speak English, right? Right.
yeah, that's true.
But how many of you are surprised by how few people speak English? कितने कम है भारत में English speakers? कितने लोग surprised हुए? Pooja, you want to say something or what?
No, I just raised my hand because you asked how many people were surprised. So I was surprised because statistically it looks kind of less, like 100 people may 11 people know how to speak English, even as like third, uh, it being the third language or something. But when we look around us, I think, but it also depends on where do you live, or the people you hang out with, or the people you're surrounded with. So I used to think that there are people who know English, like not like as native or something, but who can talk in English and understand English. So for me it was kind of surprising.
Yeah, so I think again we live in a world where we start thinking that English is the only language in India because of our medium of instruction or whatever. Very cool. Anyone else who have similar or different feeling than Pooja, and who else spoke before that? What is your response to these figures? Which are the languages that you use at home? Pooja, even then, very interesting would be 11% is fairly huge number. It is number 2 in India after Hindi. ये भी देख लो. 57% लोग हिंदी बोलते हैं and 11% English. That is number 2, right? Which is like 12 crore people, 13 crore people. That's huge, right? There are only 10 crore people who speak Bangla. 9 crore, roughly 10 crore people who speak Marathi, right? And Gujarati, 6 crore people, roughly, and its population is 4.99.
But like sir, English also reaches the second position because of since people are bilingual, like they also learn English other than their own mother tongue. So we have second language speakers and third language speakers. So that kind of increases their percentage.
And
Yeah.
even in case of Hindi, that is the case, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
First language जिनकी हिंदी है वो 43% ही है, but it goes up to 57 as the second or third language speaker, right? It
Like even
11%
Hindi,
बढ़ जाता है.
yeah, even Hindi is like, since we talk about English being the standard language, even Hindi plays a role like that. So,
It is hegemonic language.
yeah,
Hindi. It is invading our languages. It has replaced our Indian languages, and nobody talks about it.
I think I recently was just going through YouTube and there was this recommendation of how Hindi was replacing Bihari language, Bihari, the languages in Bihar, which like are very different and very diverse. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, mother tongues with more than 1 million speakers में हिंदी, बंगाली, मराठी आती है, तमिल, गुजराती, इंग्लिश तो आती ही नहीं. Okay, so this was 2011 census. अब नया आएगा 1-2 साल 3 साल में, तो figures would have changed. तो क्या figures anticipate करते हो आप लोग? क्या होगा 2000?
Probably the same, but we'll have more numbers in English. But I think it still would be in the second position.
Yes, and how much more? कितना ज़्यादा जा सकता?
अब वो तो population पे depend करेगा.
Roughly.
Yeah. I don't know, sir, honestly. बहुत ज़्यादा.
Just speculation. I'm not asking for real answers. Hindi would also go up. That's my speculation. Substantially. Okay, so this is the map of. Can you see this?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is the map of languages. Okay, so this is where I want to stop for today. Any questions, queries before I stop? Soch by Mohit Moore. The other Indian literature is reductive. No, to speak of Indian literature as one is very reductive, Jyotima. At the same time, to speak of Indian literature as totally diverse is also reductive. Yeah, that's what I was saying. That's what Amiya Dev is saying, and that's why he prefers this dialogic, interliterary concept of Indian literature. I didn't get what is Soch by Mohit Mangal.
Actually, I was talking about one video that I watched, right? The Bihar one. So Rishi, that the video is Soch by Mohit Mangal. So Rishi was actually telling that.
Okay.
I guess the name is Mohak Mangal
Yeah,
and not
the guy
Mohit
who
Mangal.
does it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway.
it is Mohak, yes. Yeah.
Yes.
YouTube channel, yes.
Okay, I'll just check out that later. It's about Bihar Hindi, right?
Yeah, the particular
And
video
sorry,
is about Bihar Hindi.
And one of my students is working on PhD on Maithili literature in English translation. And he's studying Maithili literature into English from a post-colonial perspective. And he has discovered that Maithili is one of the major languages in India. And in Nepal, it is the national language, one of the national languages. And for some reason, it has been swallowed up by Hindi. हिंदी बेल्ट कहकर सब लोगों की लैंग्वेजेस का फ्लैटन आउट कर दिया है. जैसे भोजपुरी है, जैसे अवधी है, ब्रज है, राजस्थानी वेरिएशंस है ऑफ हिंदी, पंजाबी वेरिएशंस ऑफ हिंदी है. So all that has been flattened. Okay, so we meet tomorrow then. Right? And who is making presentation tomorrow?